This should be interesting. Just a couple of hours ago, I picked up Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. I started reading it. It's a short book. I could not put it down, so I finished it in one sitting. Now I'm going to do this impromptu stream of consciousness video, my thoughts on this classic read. There will be some spoilers. Now, this is a new translation by Susan Bernofsky. It's excellent. First of all, I want to mention that Susan, I think she's a teacher at professor at Columbia or Harvard teaching translation. So, yeah, this is excellent. But let's talk about Franz Kafka first, because there's one thing in this book that just floored me. I'll tell you what it is in 1 second. But first, Franz Kafka was someone who was very troubled as a young man, heavily into pornography, brothels all the time, very low self-esteem. He did not have a great life. He did not believe in himself. In fact, I believe he burned like 90% of everything he wrote was destroyed by him. So we're lucky to have anything. And many years ago, maybe 25, 30 years ago, I was really into Kafka. His surrealistic style really appealed to me, this magic realism. I loved it. So I read Castle, I read Trial, I read Metamorphosis, the previous translation, America. I read all those books. I remember loving them, but obviously it's been a long time. So reading this now was a revelation. And one thing especially was striking, the fact that basically in this book, Franz Kafka writes his own death. I was stunned when I realized this. As I'm reading this book, towards the end of the book, the main protagonist, Gregor, dies, just kind of gives up on life, dies of starvation. His sister is the one taking care of him. Now, the amazing thing is, in real life, Franz Kafka died of starvation, and it was his sister who was taking care of him in his last weeks of his life. So basically, Franz Kafka wrote his own death when he wrote this book. This was published in 1915, but I believe he wrote it maybe 2 years prior to that. So right before World War I, the Great War, as it was known until World War II, unfortunately, knocked it off its pedestal. Anyway, so this was written right before the war, Industrial Revolution, lives are tough. But this Gregor protagonist here just feels so much like Kafka to me. Kafka, who had low self-esteem, this protagonist basically gives up on life, gives up on himself totally. When we meet Gregor, who is a traveling salesman, so there's heavy vibes actually also in this book of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. A completely different story, but there is a lot to that. In any case, we meet Gregor as he wakes up to go to work. So he wants to get up, but he realizes that his body is no longer his. He is now an insect, a bug, vermin, I think they call it, whatever. He's a roach. And you would think that anyone who realizes that they've morphed into an insect would be totally freaked out. But not Gregor. Gregor is not really concerned about the looks of his body. He is concerned with, how am I gonna get to work? How the fuck am I gonna get to work now? That is the big thing. So this is really Kafka at his best, right? His parents, of course, freak out when they see Gregor. Mother faints. Sister's the only one initially who's taking care of Gregor in this new state as an insect, as Gregor is figuring out this body of his. She brings him food. She cleans up after him. She's disgusted by him. She prefers that he gets out of the way. So Gregor just slides under the bed, covers himself so nobody sees him. Gregor in his new body basically is slowly giving up on life as he realizes that things were not as they always seemed. He was working very hard. His parents did not work. His sister, who's 17, Greta, she didn't work. She doesn't seem to do much of anything when we meet her. She plays violin supposedly nicely, but nothing other than that. So Gregor was supporting this family, but it turns out his parents had a lot of money stashed away, actually. Money that could last them now for a couple of years easily without working. But they just wanted Gregor to pay off their debts. So, but Gregor never feels like life, world, parents, anyone owes him anything. He is so reluctant. It's just so sad, the mindset. And then Franz Kafka is very gentle in giving you hints. So you have to come up with answers for yourself. There isn't any philosophy. Gregor is not thinking about, God, why did this happen to me? There's none of that. He accepts everything as it is. And it's frustrating. You want to be like, come on, Gregor, get your shit together. Do something with this. Whatever happened, live. But no, Gregor stays in one room, basically never leaves the room. And when he does, nothing good happens. His father throws apples at him. One of the apples almost kills him. So I guess there's some symbolism there with Garden of Eden, perhaps. But it's so sad. It feels like Gregor in this new body, and the way his parents are acting, especially at the end, is so sad. It made me think like, oh my gosh, this is kind of like an old person. And we hear these stories all the time at the end of their lives. The family doesn't care about them anymore. They're left maybe at some nursery home. Nobody really takes care of this old person in this old new body that they have, unable to communicate often. This is interesting also because parents are unable to understand what Gregor says. His speech is not understandable to humans. Gregor, on the other hand, understands everything that he hears, so he's hearing them talk through the walls, through the door, and it's so sad. And Gregor doesn't want anything out of his life anymore, so he doesn't even try to communicate with them. I was like, think, like, write something on the wall, let him know that you're alive, that you're still in there. But he doesn't. It is so interesting that he doesn't, and it tells us so much about the psyche of someone whose self-esteem is very low, who feels like they don't really deserve anything out of life. As soon as they're not useful, as soon as they're not productive anymore, when they can't go to work, it doesn't matter. They're disposable, essentially. And what happens at the end of this book again is so sad. When finally Gregor decides to just lay down and die, the family is actually happy. There's a renewal. Spring is in the air. They take a day off and they go, I think, to the country. And Gregor just disappears. He's disposed by a maid or something. Such an interesting book. It's definitely not for everyone, but to me it was so refreshing to get back to reading Kafka. And Kafka's style is his own. I mean, there isn't anyone else like him, so it's difficult to compare him to anyone else. He's the Salvador Dali of writing. I truly love this book, and also the cover, it's so nice, right? With Metamorphosis spelled out in the shape of an insect. I really like that as well. So the aesthetics of this book are quite pleasing. It's a short read. And it's a book that will make you think. It's a book that will stay with you. I mean, it feels like at times like a horror almost. I was freaked out so many times reading this book, not because it was scary what was happening, although there are moments, but really it was so visceral. I felt like my body was changing, morphing into an insect. I like saw insects running around this space where I was reading the book. My skin was crawling. It was so affecting, this book, reading about how Gregor is being fed like scraps and he's eating them, him enjoying running up the walls and sticking to the ceiling where he feels like he could breathe finally. There were so many moments in this book that were interesting, powerful. Short read, drops you right into this scenario, into this situation, and never lets up. So I do recommend reading this book. It's a classic, not quite a sci-fi, not exactly sci-fi for sure, but close enough, I think, that this counts for me. In this month where I'm supposed to be reading classic sci-fi books, and just as a quick update, I've already read City by C-Mac. I read Hyperion, I loved it so much. I read A Time Machine, H.G. Wells, that was good. I read Fahrenheit 451 in a graphic novel form, but it still counts, and I read the book before. And I'm missing something. Oh, I'm missing the one that I didn't enjoy, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I didn't like that at all, just not my type of humor. So anyway, this was excellent. Thank you for watching the video. Let me know if you've read Kafka before. What do you think of his writing? Does it appeal to you? What are you reading these days? If you haven't read Kafka, let me know if there's something that I should pick up. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next video.